Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Path to Sub-Second Page Loads, Beat the Speed of Light with Pantheon and Fastly. Your speakers for today are Josh Koenig and David Strauss, co-founders here at Pantheon, along with our guest speaker, Simon Wistow, founder and VP of Product Strategy at Fastly. Just a few housekeeping items to go over before we start. Please make sure you submit any questions you have during the presentation in the question window, or tweet them at GetPantheon. We'll answer as many of the questions as we can during the Q&A portion of today's presentation. Also, this webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be made available to everyone next week. And now let's turn it over to Josh, David, and Simon.
Hi, this is David Strauss on the Pantheon side, and I wanted to start off the conversation today with why performance and security are really important for websites and how they have a direct impact on bottom line or whatever a website is trying to accomplish, whether it's selling things through e-commerce or signing up volunteers or just getting the word out about something. Performance and security affects user behavior. One of the most important things that has really come out of the last couple of years is the importance of HTTPS. It's gone from something that was on just e-commerce sites and maybe some bank sites to something that is on almost every major site, and now that is expanding in scope to include almost every site, period, that launches on the internet, especially ones that take user information, that take passwords, credit card information, etc. Chrome, as you can see from the left, has gone from just merely lacking a secure notifier to actually calling out that a page is not secure if it takes input from users. And you can actually see what that's going to be escalating to as time goes on with the red marker on the left that will be very much in users' faces saying that the page is not set up properly. Also, browser makers like Firefox and Chrome are also gatekeeping around some features like geolocation, notifications, encrypted media extensions, and device motion detection on the basis of whether a site has HTTPS. It's affecting user behavior once they're on the site, it's affecting what you can do with sites, and it's also affecting search engine rankings now too, as Google is including that in the PageRank results. One thing that affects user behavior even more than a little icon in the corner is often how fast the page is actually active and usable by them. We've done a fair bit of research on what to do on the Pantheon platform in terms of what makes a page load really fast. And the answer, almost overwhelmingly, is a CDN that caches everything in terms of pages, assets and resources for the site. As you can see from the model here, you can go from having a page rendering time that takes seconds down to a page rendering time that is sub-second just by having the right resources cached in the right places. The reason why when tying these things together in terms of HTTPS and CDNs is that you can't really consider them in isolation. When it comes to setting up a secure connection to a website, you have to make multiple round trips from the browser, whether it's on a phone or a laptop, to whatever is actually running the HTTPS for the site, whether that's the origin data center or whether that's something like points of presence of a CDN, which is a sort of footprint in the digital neighborhood of the person browsing to the website that they actually talk to as a sort of liaison to the main website infrastructure. And that point of presence not only serves a role of caching, but as you can kind of see from the graphs on the left, the top one is what happens when a browser is connecting to a backend directly all the way to the origin. And the lower graph shows what happens when a browser is connecting to a local point of presence, where it's basically the equivalent of going to a corner store to run a few errands, rather than the equivalent of having to go all the way downtown to pick up things for browsing that website. So these have effects that interact with each other, that deploying HTTPS to a site without thinking about the round trips, without thinking about a CDN, can impact performance as well as the security for the site. And this manifests in terms of the basic waterfall to loading a page. Whenever you pull up developer tools in a browser, you can see a very, very detailed waterfall of how all the assets load for a page in terms of establishing the TCP connection, negotiating a TLS to get the HTTPS connection, collecting the actual HTML for the page, downloading it, and then actually connecting, at least in the traditional sense, to other servers or the origin to download all the resources so that they can download more resources in parallel. And then eventually, once you've collected all the HTML and all the resources, you get to render the page, which in most browsers, the term for that is kind of time to first paint, which is when the page starts becoming more usable in terms of having content and getting that first rendering pass in the browser. That's often when people psychologically care about the page loading from a performance basis. But traditionally, this was a pretty awful process because every connection would go all the way to the origin, every TLS negotiation would go all the way to the origin, and all the resources would load all the way from the origin, and often do it over older protocols like HTTP 1.1, which meant that they had to have an independent connection set up for every single thing in parallel that was being done. And this really slows down the page. This is based off pretty real-world data that we've aggregated on sites, and this is kind of representing the really legacy approach of no CDN, no page caching, no real resource caching, and just everything running basically from a VM set up in the data center somewhere, or even a cluster set up in a data center somewhere. And as time has gone on, a lot of infrastructures have moved to a bit of a hybrid approach, where what they do is they add a CDN, but only use it for the assets or resources for the page. And you'll often see this if you pull up the source for a page or look at the waterfall in the developer tools, and you see a CDN subdomain or domain for all the CSS and JavaScript and images. You'll see all manner of brands of CDN doing this, and what happens is that you're connecting to one server for the web page and different servers for the resources. And this goes a long way to helping optimizations because it means that for all these resources that you're loading for the page, which can total 30 plus, even 100 plus on some pages, that takes a much shorter trip than all the way to the origin. But it's still starting the race late in the sense that you can only know what resources to load once you've established the connection with the origin server, and that takes a long time still here. You'll notice that between these two things, the origin TCP and TLS connections don't really get shorter because you're still talking all the way to something in another state or country or even across an ocean to get that request set up. So finally, we've all landed on this approach that really is why we're collaborating with Fastly on the global CDN deployment for Pantheon, which is a very comprehensive approach to caching, where we not only put the resources on the page in the digital neighborhood of the person browsing, but we also put the page cache itself in that area. And that means not only can the page get delivered faster, but the browser can figure out what resources it needs faster. It actually is able to start the race of loading the page hundreds of milliseconds faster, and that creates a lot of headroom for other performance optimization and load time. And this really matters for a site because it's not just a subjective thing of the site owner saying a site is slow, but the time to first byte is what seems to correlate based on research by HubSpot and others for what Google uses in their PageRank. Time to first byte is particularly the thing that seems most correlated with how they set up PageRank. All other things being equal, the PageRank, the ranking in the search results can drop by 5 or 10 by adding a few hundred milliseconds to the time to first byte. Now, there are many other impacts to search result ranking, so this is not the only thing influencing it, but as you can see from the chart on the left, what happens is as something falls down in the search ranking, the actual click-through rate of customers or visitors falls through the floor. So falling from first to second and second to third and third to fourth can have a dramatic impact on that sort of top of funnel traffic that's actually reaching a website in the first place. And it's not even just about getting people on the website. once they're on the website, the time to actually viewing the content of the page, this sort of time to first paint, has a dramatic impact on the behavior of people once they're on the website. So we have that huge fall off on whether people reach the website based on the performance of time to first byte. And now we have a huge fall off here where if time to first paint starts exceeding 2.4 seconds, we start seeing this drop off in conversion rate where you're getting less than a third of the conversion rate that you get on a fast site because users are actually really impatient about this. And that's why it drops from about 1.9 on industry average conversion rate to about 0.6 once you're getting to 5.7 seconds for your first paint.
Hi, I'm Simon Wisso. I'm one of the co-founders of Fastly. It's actually kind of funny. We've actually had a long history with Pantheon going back many, many years. When we were starting the company, we started out of our apartment, and the apartment was 2 floors of a Pantheon's office in downtown San Francisco. And then our third office after that, we also shared an office building. So it feels like we've been building for this moment for a while. So we've already kind of gone over a little bit about what a CDN does. Without a CDN, whatever user comes to your site, they've got to traverse all the way across all the networks. I mean, this has got direct lines, but if you're in Melbourne and you want to go to a site in Europe, like The Guardian, which is a really popular newspaper in the UK, but it's also really popular in Australia, if you're in Melbourne, then you've got to go from Melbourne to Sydney, Sydney to Hawaii, Hawaii to LA, LA to New York, New York to Cornwall, which is the little weird footy bit down to the bottom left of the UK. That's where GCHQ will read all your email, and then it goes all the way to London, and then gets the Guardian servers. And it's about 10,000 miles, like give or take, to get from to do that trip in a direct line. The speed of light, even with the speed of light, that takes a while because you've got to do this like connection that we've shown in the earlier diagram, where you've got to go there and back doing the TCP connection. So, see, one of the things that the CDN does is send you to the nearest POP. It's a little bit like if you type Starbucks into Google Maps, we'll send you to the nearest Starbucks, not just the most popular Starbucks. And so basically what we're able to do is, in this somewhat contrived and stylized map, is point you to send a user to the nearest POP to where they're browsing from. And so that cuts down the latency by cutting down the TCP connection time, by cutting down the HTTPS connection negotiation time. And so even without caching, a CDN makes your life better. Then the next step of that, which is where most traditional CDNs stop, is that they just cache the static assets. And so they load things like images, CSS, JavaScript, and they cache those close to the user. But anything that's dynamic, that any page that changes, any page that's personalized, all they do is accelerate it, because that was just the way that people thought of the difference between dynamic and static content. And this is where Fastly comes in. So we started in 2011. At that point, like, people already thought of CDN as the CDN market as being a commodity. There'd been a big rush of CDNs that got started in sort of the mid 2000s. Akamai had been around since 1998, and so there was Edgecast, there was Cloudflare, there was CloudFront. So people asked us, like, what are you doing this for? And the reason is because we thought that CDNs didn't have the feature set that we wanted to build modern websites. At the time, they were black boxes that you just threw content into, and you had no idea what was going on. You had no visibility. You had no way to update the pages. And Arthur and I both had these problems, like, with the CDNs we were using at the company we were working at. Like, he had this problem where he had content that was a lot of long tail content that would every so often need to change really rapidly, and he couldn't get CDN companies to give him really instant purge times. So he couldn't put his dynamic content on CDNs. He's like, this is ridiculous. Like, no website is based on static content anymore. It's all dynamic content. And meanwhile, I'd have problems with the CDN I was using at the time where I wanted to make a change to our configuration. I got in at 7 o'clock in the morning. I made a change to our configuration. I deployed, and I had to wait 8 hours for the config to change. And about sort of the 7.5-hour mark, we started noticing that there were problems loading images in Europe. We'd seen this before as configurations started to converge, but we had no visibility into what was going on. The only way to debug was to turn the CDN off. So we waited and waited, and about 8.5 hours after I'd first hit deploy, I realized I'd made a mistake in the configuration, and I'd forgotten to escape a character, so I made that one character change, and I deployed again, and it was another 8 hours. So it was a 17-hour day for me to make a one-line, one-character change. Meanwhile, we deployed the site we were working on probably 20 or 30 times. And so both Arthur and I complained about this stuff, and we thought, yeah, how hard can it be to start a CDN? Turns out it was a lot harder than we thought, but the stupidity is great. So we plunged into this. We've now got 6 global offices around the world. We've got offices in New York, London, Tokyo, Denver, and Portland. We've got over 1,500 customers, 350 employees, although it seems like every time I go into the office we have even more, and our network is up to 15 terabits per second, and I think that number might actually already be out of date, but and it's growing. And the picture to the left, just in case you're wondering what it was, that was our first 2 servers, which we shipped to London by checking with as baggage at SFO. So it's a little bit of Fastly history. You probably don't know, you may never have heard of us, but you probably use a site that uses us. We've got everybody from The Guardian, Pinterest, Imager, GitHub, Reddit, where e-commerce companies, content publisher companies, like everybody. It's kind of amazing, like seeing some of these brands that I use every day kind of come onto our system. So what we try and differentiate ourselves on is 3 main aspects. First of which is performance. We took a different approach to traditional CDNs. Instead of having hundreds of thousands of small pops, we've ended up having a small number of very, very powerful pops. And we put those on internet exchange points. And the reason behind that is the larger a pop is, the more powerful it is. The more powerful it is, the more logic you can move to the edge, which really helps your cache hit ratio. And the larger the cache is, the more that we can cache stuff, and the larger a cache hit ratio we can get. We've got world-class dynamic site acceleration, which is that acceleration you get on a site just by cutting down the TCP latency. If you go and look at sort of independent third-party site indexes, we usually rank 1 or 2 no matter where you are in the world, which we're kind of imperative if you're going to be called Fastly. And we support modern standards like IPv6 and HTTP2, and we're at the moment really heavily involved with the standards process for QUIC, which is the new connection protocol that's sort of an evolution of both of those things. We act as an origin shield. Basically what this means is if you, what you can do is designate one of our pops to sit in front of one of your pops, one of your origins. And so it's usually the Fastly pop that is closest to your origin server. And the reason why this is important is when you purge some content, when you purge your front page, you're going to get a stampeding herd of customers coming in to try and get that page. So we do 2 things. We do request collapsing, which is when 2 people request the same piece of content at the same time, we only go and fetch it once and we return it to both. And then we make everything funnel through the shield pop. And that means that the shield pop can do request collapsing again. You'll only get 1 request back to your origin, and then we can deliver it back to all the edge nodes that have requested it, and then onto all the users that requested it. And that also means that when, say, Tokyo wakes up sort of 16 hours after San Francisco, when they go and fetch the same piece of content, and traffic starts to ramp up, they'll go to the shield, and the shield will already have it in cache. So it's one of those really, it's a really simple thing, but it's a really important thing for protecting your origin, which means that you can cut down on your the number of nodes you need at your origin, which cuts down OpEx, CapEx, makes everything faster, and is just generally good for you. One of the most important features we have is the ability to purge instantly. So we say instantly, it's about 150 milliseconds on global average. And what that means is that you can, instead of having time to live based content, so that content expires, like the front page only expires every 5 minutes or every hour, you can have event-driven content. And that's really important if you're a content publisher like CNN, when you've got breaking news. You don't want to be out of date just because your CDN is only checking stuff for 5 minutes, but you also don't want to have your TTL too low because then your site is getting hit. Really important things like sport events or comments that got updated on websites or pages that get edited, a lot of user-generated content. One of the other cool features we've got is tag content based on keys, and then purge a tag, and all the content will get purged at the same time. So really useful if you're a content publisher, you've got multiple assets on a page or multiple pages of the same story, or if you're an e-commerce site, so you can tag everything in a sale and then purge it when the sale starts, and then purge all the items on the sale when the sale ends again. So the other really important thing about a CDN is security. We work with Pantheon to use Fastly's API to manage Let's Encrypt certificates. And that means they can give TLS to everybody. And we've seen how important TLS already is. Fastly terminates the TLS connections at the edge and then re-encrypts them going back to Pantheon servers, which means that Pantheon needs less resources to go and manage these TLS terminations. It also means that we can do a lot of DDoS and security protection right at the edge. Our network acts as one giant DDoS scrubbing network, rather than what a lot of DDoS providers do, which is separate out your DDoS network from your regular network. So we can use the whole power of all of our network as a DDoS scrubbing center, which is really important at the moment when you can buy massive DDoS capability for hundreds, thousands of dollars on the dark web, which is why we have this ominous picture of a man in a hoodie. One of the things that made it really easy for us to work with Pantheon is we have a shared Varnish heritage. Varnish is an open source reverse proxy developed by a guy called Paul Henningkamp for a Norwegian newspaper called Verdens Gang, although I'm almost certainly pronouncing that wrong. Pantheon, we're using Varnish. Varnish is incredibly powerful. You can configure almost every aspect of HTTP request and response via a configuration language called VCL, Varnish Configuration Language, which is really, really powerful domain-specific language. What we've done at Fastly is we built an API on top of everything that allows you to manage your configuration via API, via these first-class objects that we have, but also upload custom VCL if you really need to. The other thing that's really, really important if you're using a CDN is that you can get a visibility into what's going on. If you're caching your whole page and you can't see your logs and stats for 24 hours or even for an hour, then you have no idea what's going on with your site. You don't know if things have gone wrong. You don't know if a page has gone viral. So it's really important you get real-time logs and stats from the edge so that you can then put more configuration using this VCL right up on the edge so that things are done at the edge, so they're faster for users, and it's all this virtuous cycle. And so basically what that means is that you can do a bunch of business logic at the edge. There are things like A/B testing or auth or global load balancing. You can do that all at the edge, which means you get a higher cache hit ratio. You don't have to go back to your origin. You're secure, and you're getting real-time visibility. So all this kind of led up to an event earlier this year. We had a joint customer, the ACLU, and they experienced a massive surge in traffic on giving I can't remember, there was a day, the giving day, and they got nearly an 8,500% increase in traffic. And they saw no service disruption because they were using Pantheon and they were using Fastly. They got an extra $24 million in donations in one weekend, which is 6 times their yearly average. And if their site had been down, they wouldn't have been able to collect all that money, and they wouldn't be able to put it to good use. So that was like a really important milestone. I think both companies were really proud, and that's kind of really what kicked off this idea that, well, if this worked for the ACLU, and that level of control was really allowed Pantheon to make those changes, and that level of sort of integration was really important, maybe we should look at this further. So I'm going to hand off, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that.
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, this is a great story. We're all incredibly proud of this year. So I'm going to talk about Pantheon plus Fastly and what we are calling our global CDN. And it really is, we're using this amazing technology and capability that Fastly provides as an edge cloud platform to deliver just the right CDN for our use case and for our customers. And that's how we make it so good. So the first thing about this is that it's zero configuration. What we've done is made all of the goodness that is possible with Fastly and a properly configured origin and a properly configured server and a properly configured CMS just happen out of the box, the way it should be. That's partly possible for us because we've been based on Varnish since the get-go. We were actually able to transition over all of our customers to the global CDN without actually, in many cases, having to tell them at all that it was, your website just magically got faster. We love it when that happens. And even perhaps even more importantly, and David's going to talk about this, we can make it zero config to deliver HTTPS.
So we have customers and agencies on the platform that have tens, hundreds, even thousands of sites. And the way that we've seen HTTPS treated historically is that it was sort of icing on the cake when you had the money and time to do it for a website, or if the website absolutely had to do it because it was something like e-commerce or handling other sensitive content. The problem with that approach is that it means that the long tail of sites don't get HTTPS. And that's because when you're confined on time and money, it's just a really easy thing to cut. But it's also such an important thing to deliver for sites, and there's really no reason for it to be treated as icing when it can just be part of the cake. And that's what we're doing on Pantheon as part of Global CDN, where when a site gets wired into Global CDN, we automatically provision the certificate through Let's Encrypt. We automatically handle renewals of the certificate. We handle pushing it to Fastly through their APIs so that it gets terminated at at least 40 points around the world, so that the termination is secure, it's fast, and it's trouble-free. Because there's a lot more to HTTPS than just writing the check for a certificate or for extra costs to deploy it. It's actually quite a burden the more websites you have to keep all this stuff maintained.
And I think one of the important things to mention about our implementation here is that it's both like magically delivered out of the box, and also it's encrypted end to end. That's really important if you care about security. I mean, Simon, you mentioned that so quickly that this is where the government reads all your email. But there's, it's a good thing to have like the front half of your HTTP transaction encrypted so that someone else sitting at the coffee shop can't just like steal your token and start, administering your CMS, which I've seen demoed here in San Francisco. It's really easy to do with off-the-shelf software. But if the back half of the connection isn't encrypted, you're still not going to pass muster from any security standpoint, and there are real vulnerabilities there. And so with our implementation, we have the certificate for your domain deployed to Fastly, around the world that can terminate HTTPS there for your users, and it makes that very fast. And then every step of the way, through Fastly's network, back to Pantheon, through our own routing mesh, down to the individual container that runs your CMS, your PHP application, WordPress or Drupal, that is encrypted back all the way into the PHP layer. So it's complete end-to-end encryption deliverable out of the box. There's no mixed mode on Pantheon. It's not even an option. The other thing you don't have to do is you don't have to worry about configuring a bunch of host names. This is really crucial for how we deliver the performance, because you want to actually have, again, one layer that kind of terminates everything, which is contrary to the kind of legacy approach of having your primary domain and your CDN domain, or maybe your managed hosting provider's CDN domain, and kind of having to figure out where and how you route these different requests to the right domain to make things work. We also don't need to take over your DNS to do this. You just point your DNS at Fastly, or rather at Pantheon, with IP space that we have deployed and control, and then the rest of it just magically works. You don't have to do anything beyond that. So you can keep your current DNS provider. There's no need to force a change there to get access to the features. There's no API to integrate, and there's no CMS customization to do. Every website on Pantheon deployed out of the box is set up to integrate with this global CDN in a powerful way that delivers the kind of results that David talked about at the beginning, and I have data to prove it at the end of this presentation with everyone we've migrated over. Certainly, there's a long and beautiful stretch of things that developers can focus on to maximize both their front-end performance and their kind of cache strategy and the expiration strategy. And we have tools for doing that. Like if you have a thought about how you want to utilize the surrogate key expiration strategy, or adjust your default time to lives and so forth, all of that is available to developers on Pantheon, but you don't have to do anything out of the box. The same things that we built into the core of our platform to make our original Varnish implementation work have completely and 100% ported to the global CDN powered by Fastly. So it basically just works out of the box. The most work you'll ever have to do is change your DNS once. And then there's lots more you can do afterwards if you'd like to. There's also no new language to learn, so like VCL is incredibly powerful, but it's a whole other world. It's not at all like PHP, and it requires a specific expertise So again, if you're a major media company and like you have a dev team on staff, or you're hiring an agency that they have experts who specialize in this sort of stuff, totally makes sense to like go get a Fastly account and do this stuff yourself. But for the long tail of sites, and even for a lot of sites where you have a senior developer, but they're much more needed in terms of working out the business logic for how the e-commerce should work, or ensuring that the user experience is executed correctly versus learning yet another tool and implementing VCL. Pantheon, we sit in front of tens of thousands of high traffic, dynamic WordPress and Drupal sites, including the full range of use cases that Simon's talked about before. We've invested years of this expertise in developing our Varnish configuration. It's very powerful, and you get all the benefits of that just by being on our platform. And what that lets us give you is this notion of full website acceleration, not just asset acceleration, not just network acceleration. The whole website accelerated out of the box all the time, and that's what you need to get to sub-second page loads, which I think is that's the bar. That's the new bar for user experience. If it's not loading in under a second, you're not reaching the goal. So why doesn't everyone do this? This is one of my favorite whimsical witticisms in the world of development. There are just only two hard things in computer science: cache invalidation, naming things, and of course off by one errors. And actually this is, it's witty, it's funny because it's true. It's funny and true. Both the internal recursive joke about being off by one, naming things is actually really hard. Like once you have enough, like more than a couple different systems going, and like, I mean, that's the source of so much technical debt, is actually probably misnamed things, and then I would also say cleverness. That which was clever in the early days can become the bane of your existence at scale. But cache invalidation is actually really, really difficult. And this goes all the way through. This is true not just for web pages. This is equally true for network routing. It is true for CPU design. It is true for basically. I've seen Paul Henningkamp, the creator of Varnish, present before. He's a very dynamic and humorous presenter. If you ever get a chance to see him talk at a conference, go. But he had this whole description of how, like, when I was in school, I learned that this is what a computer was. It's a CPU and memory and persistent storage and a bus. And this is all lies, because there's like hundreds of layers of caching just inside the computer. And it's caches all the way down. So your device has layers of caching, the network the device talks to has layers of caching, et cetera, et cetera. This is key to how you make things fast, but it's also very complicated, and it can be very difficult to get correct. And if it's incorrect, it can have catastrophic effects. And so historically, this is like you were talking about the CDN providers of the world, the yesterday's CDN providers, really, they just kind of ducked this whole problem. They're saying, well, we'll do the static stuff that doesn't need to be invalidated very often, if at all, because that's the problem we can solve. And at Pantheon, and I think we're kindred spirits at Fastly, we like to pick off some hard problems and try to solve them.
And you gotta love some of the solutions that they have for these things, which are just like, oh, you should just use a different file name for that if you need to change the file.
You can change it. Just change the file.
Just solve cache invalidation using the other problem, which is new.
So I'm gonna make this is poking a little bit of fun at David as we were rehearsing the webinar. He said this, and he's like, "No, but this is why we're like NASA." And everyone looked like, "No, seriously, let me explain." It's an interesting way of looking at it, and it's an interesting way of thinking about solving hard problems, because we're not the smartest people in the world. We're smart, but a lot of people are smart, and we can't lay any claim to some like special intelligence that isn't present in hundreds of thousands of other individuals from all walks of life around the world and in our field. But what makes us different is not that we have the smartest people, but that we've chosen this as a use case and we've developed an integrated technology stack to solve that use case. So the actual example that David was thinking of when he said we're like NASA is that like NASA in the course of doing the Gemini and Apollo missions actually developed a number of technologies, like essentially what was a fax machine, decades before any of that ever became commercially available. And that was possible. They were able to get so far ahead and do all these things because they had a really specific use case which was like launching human beings into the space and eventually to the moon. And they had a completely integrated technology stack for solving that use case. Some components in the space program came off the shelf, but most were designed and implemented specifically for that program. Now, we're not the space program. We're like, we liken ourselves to them. I would never say that what we're doing is as important as exploring the universe, but in the same way, we are taking components that are carefully considered. We don't necessarily commission them to be designed for billions of dollars from an aerospace company, but we do look at all the range of technologies that we use. Initially, we chose Varnish for very specific reasons, and when we looked at partners to extend the reach of our platform globally, we chose Fastly, again, for very specific reasons. It's because it solves our use case, and we can integrate it end-to-end with our existing technology stack. And when you actually focus on a specific area versus being just a kind of general purpose platform, and you have an integrated set of technologies that actually know your use case, you can do much, much more than a generic provider or even kind of a, we kind of will do whatever you want to do, managed provider can go for. And that is core to our strategy. That is who we are. It's in our technology DNA as Pantheon. So we've done all this, and of course we want to prove that it matters. That we're actually delivering on all the value that David talked about early on. And so, as I mentioned, we're able to move a lot of customers to the global CDN in the early adoption phase without, in some cases without telling them, in many cases with them just opting to make a simple DNS change and get their website accelerated. So what I did with some of my colleagues was we kept track of this as it was going on. And we took about 340 some early adopter websites from that group, and we used the open source web page speed test suite to compare before and after. We were able to set it up to route to either our legacy Chicago data center or to route through the global CDN. And we set up tests to run that from the Oregon, Frankfurt, and Singapore AWS regions. Just use EC2 because it was easy. We basically kept it apples to apples by just testing with Chrome on a simulated cable connection. So not super high bandwidth. We're not correctly modeling whatever the local network conditions would be because we're starting in AWS. But it's a good test in terms of giving apples to apples what it's like to be on or off Pantheon's global CDN. So here's the histogram of all the sites, and with colored lines depending on where the test was originating from and what was being tested. And so the one that is, and lower is better. So the set of tests that of course performed the worst were the legacy Pantheon configuration from Singapore, because to get from Singapore to Chicago, you literally have to go halfway around the world. There's just no other way around it. So the tests there were not stellar. Although I will say that the most optimized websites on the far left, this is time to first paint that I'm measuring here. So it's like, again, when does a user actually see the result? The most optimized websites, even on Pantheon's legacy system, because we've done everything else as good as we could, they were getting like 1.5 seconds time to first paint, which is admirable under the circumstances. But the average was much worse, and so sites that hadn't been particularly well optimized had obviously a poor time to first paint. And I removed a few outliers from this that were way off the charts because they might have had some ad tech in the page load that basically suspended time to first paint for 10 to 20 seconds, which is unfortunately an all too common problem. If you actually just condense this graph down to the actual results, what we see here is this is just us before and us after. So from the West Coast, the median went from about 1.3 seconds to about 0.8. EU went from 1.6 to about the same. And even if you're in APAC, it went from a median of about 3 seconds to just under 1 second. So this is how we get to sub-second page loads, which is what everyone should really be. I mean, that is the bar. There's a clear psychological difference in receiving a response to something you tapped into a device, whether it was your thumb or your mouse, within a second versus waiting longer. And it has to do with the way in which people's cognition works. If it takes more than a second, you're going to start thinking about something else. The user's going to open another tab, they're going to put down their phone, they're going to switch to a new app, and they may never come back. And so you have this chance to engage people when they click. And if you can respond to that engagement, they can see your website in under a second, then your life is going to be much better. And if that time takes longer and longer and longer, then your website will fare worse and worse and worse. So we're incredibly proud of this work. We're really happy to have Simon here chatting with us. It's a ton of fun. And I think at this point we'd be happy to take questions from the audience.
Alrighty, thank you guys. We're going to jump right in here and see how many we can fit in. The first question is, does the Pantheon Global CDN and HTTPS negate any benefits from BigPipe?
So they're solving different problems, and they optimize for completely different things. I would never say that anything negates a benefit that way. What's happening though is that BigPipe gets invoked by Drupal 8 when it's a dynamic response from the backend. So we're basically already at plan B by that point, in the sense that we haven't been able to hit a page cache in the edge. And then the way that BigPipe happens is that it starts pumping out progressive chunks of content and streaming them to the browser so that it can enrich a page but get the basic framework up. What this does benefit, what this design does benefit in terms of BigPipe is first the negotiation for that initial page, that all of those round trips that happen to the origin in the absence of a CDN slow down that initial request before anything like BigPipe could ever get invoked. And additionally, even with BigPipe on a page, there's still going to be a bunch of other resources like CSS, JavaScript, images, etc. that need to load to the page. And the quick access to those is also vitally important for the rendering time of the page. So I would say that BigPipe and a CDN like this are quite complementary, although the cases in which BigPipe gets invoked are not necessarily the cases that take advantage of every benefit of the CDN in terms of the fact that it's missing the edge for the page. But it's still good things to combine.
Alrighty. Next question. Is it possible to obtain complete traffic logs from the CDN, including cached hits?
It is possible for Pantheon to do this. So Simon talked about, for us as a platform provider, real-time visibility into traffic and what's going on from the edge on down is incredibly important. And it helps us optimize and maintain uptime and know that the configuration changes that we're deploying are having the effect that we want them to have. As of today, we don't have a way to share this information on a per-site basis with customers, but we plan to. This isn't something we haven't had historically, and so it's not like a capability was lost with this release, but there are potentially new capabilities we could offer to our users. So people who are particularly interested in tuning their specific site's cache hit rate, that makes a ton of sense to me. We would love to be able to deliver those statistics, but as of today, it's not available. You have to stay tuned.
All right. Next question is, we thought browsers that utilize a different domain for static assets will load them faster and in parallel. Isn't this still the case between modern browsers?
Can I take this one? Okay. So this is actually not the case anymore. What happened historically is that with HTTP 1.1, each connection could have up to one request active at a time. And so what a browser would do is, let's say Chrome as an example. Chrome, out of the box, ships with a configuration that allows up to 6 simultaneous connections to any given domain. What then happens is that if you were trying to parallelize the loading of assets, you might do something where the main page has one domain, and then you have a different domain for the assets, and then what will happen is that Chrome will have the connection to the main page, and then it's able to spawn up to 6 connections to whatever other domain is being used for resources. And if there are multiple domains being used for resources, it'll spawn up to 6 to each of those targets.
And that was like an old school front-end performance hack.
Yeah.
Where you have like CDNA, CDNB, CDNC, CDND, so you could get the user browser to, there's actually some kind of maximum, but you could get like 10, 15 simultaneous connections going.
And it also had the side effects for less intelligent caches of often having a different domain than where the cookies were set, so that you could hit those caches because the browser wouldn't be sending a cookie up to those domains either. Now, the cookie thing gets just solved through the actual VCL that we have deployed with Fastly, in the sense that we don't treat cookies for the public resource directories for WordPress and Drupal as something that can mitigate the cache hit rate. The more important question is what happens with the browser connections. And all of that's changed with HTTP 2. So Chrome does not, when it establishes, and this is really every major browser at this point that supports HTTP 2, it's able to establish one connection and multiplex that with as many concurrent requests for data as it wants. There's actually no finite cap in Chrome on the number of requests that it will put out simultaneously on an HTTP 2 channel. And that means that there's no self-imposed bottleneck on a per domain basis that is causing something like Chrome or Firefox or Safari or Edge or any modern browser to actually slow down on this basis. And more importantly, in terms of resources, in the longer term, and this will probably get much more important once browsers are able to pass digests up for HTTP2, but it can actually push resources down to the browser. So before the browser has actually parsed the page and actually knows what resources it needs, the future is being able to preemptively know that those resources will be necessary for rendering the page and send them to the browser before it even realizes it needs to ask for them.
All right, we have a couple questions on this next one. Simply put, Pantheon plus Cloudflare versus Pantheon plus Fastly. Ooh, it's a big one.
Who wants to take this?
Simon wants to take it, Josh wants to take it.
I don't feel like I can take this one.
Yeah. So I'll speak to this. I mean, we have a lot of customers who use Cloudflare, and I think Cloudflare is a fine technology and provides a good service. The differences are, I think the key differentiators for us in terms of choosing a technology partner that we could treat as a platform to build, like really feel like we're building our CDN on top of something. That's much more the way that Fastly approaches things versus Cloudflare, which is kind of much more of a product that gets delivered to the end user. And so, Fastly is just much more configurable. It was Varnish as a shared lineage made that technology integration. We made it faster and has had a lot more confidence in it. And I think that the challenge with Cloudflare is for sites is that Cloudflare plus like legacy Pantheon, you would still be going to our origin data center for the initial page load under almost all circumstances. We would have our own, cache at that layer. We ran our own Varnish, so it was good, but it's not as good as that first page load from the edge. And a lot of people on using Cloudflare aren't able to, for various reasons, able to take advantage of end-to-end encryption because they're looking to Cloudflare to deliver HTTPS, which is great. But when Cloudflare is delivering HTTPS, that's usually they're pursuing that because they didn't have it in the first place. And so because they didn't have it in the first place, there's an origin server somewhere that Cloudflare is going to talk back to, which isn't ready to deal with encrypted traffic. And so we have a doc page actually for people who like Cloudflare's features and want to continue to use them. They work fine on top of the global CDN. So for instance, people who really like Cloudflare's WAF, or they've done a lot of stuff with Cloudflare's page rules, those things can just layer right on top. You can continue to use Cloudflare as a DNS provider if you want. But in terms of, for us, when we did examine a number of other technology providers with Cloudflare in the process of choosing the platform that we wanted to build on, and we chose Fastly for all these reasons. What are other words?
It's actually funny, we were talking earlier. We're right down the road from Cloudflare. They've been around since approximately the same amount of time as us. I think they were started in 2008, 2009. It's a great product, and Matthew Prince, who's the CEO, his apartment looks onto our balcony at work. So we're pretty intimate. But Cloudflare's a great product, but I think one of the things we specialized on was trying to build a platform that people could build stuff on top of, whereas Cloudflare is much more focused on kind of small consumers. So it's kind of not really an apples-to-apples comparison, and I think Cloudflare's a great product, but yeah, we just got different use cases.
All right, we'll put that one to rest. Next question. Can you use the Drupal Fastly module to force a purge based on updates to nodes, so it purges pages whenever they are updated.
Sure. So we can actually do better than that. We have modules available and also a plugin available for WordPress called the Pantheon Advanced Page Cache. And more than just purging individual nodes based on things like URLs, what this does is it actually gets cache keying data in the same way that we heard about earlier, and in terms of what Fastly can support, and it puts those into a header called surrogate key for the page, and then that actually tags the outgoing page with all of the kind of ingredients that have been included in it, so that if you have a front page of the site and it has 3 different nodes on it and several blocks that include node content, those will all get tagged on there, in addition to the node page itself. And then when you edit the node, it'll actually clear every single thing on the site that has consumed data from that node. So it doesn't matter if you have 10 pages that have a block based on that node, or just the node page itself, it will granularly update the edge cache. And then and this invalidation gets replicated out to the 40 pops around the world in 150 milliseconds or less. And this is fully integrated with the platform in a way where you just have to install the module on the site. There's 0 configuration you have to do from that point. That will tag all of your outgoing content, and it will handle talking to Pantheon's platform APIs and then forwarding the data to Fastly in an appropriate manner to selectively clear that data around the world.
This is again one of those things where you out of the box we do the kind of the default classic Pantheon, brought globally by Fastly with the advanced page cache modular plugin. You get this granular capability, and it really is just installed. There's 0 config for the plugin, and the plugin, of course, leverages APIs which are available to developers who may have, in the Drupal world, you can get pretty fancy with your content strategy and information architecture and how you use views and page composition tools like paragraphs or panels. And in the WordPress world, if you're doing anything that's not just kind of out of the box WordPress, that's usually going to involve some custom code somewhere. And so you may need to write like 10, 20 lines of hooks and actions to ensure you get the right kind of cache.
And there are more details on this particular approach from my blog post from Monday, which is the battle of fast versus fresh, where we're talking about how can we actually keep things cached for a really long time, but ensure that when they change, we actually swap them out. I'll add that this is actually probably the best example in the entire stack of the kind of NASA-style approach to the engineering, in the sense that by understanding the content model of the CMS and running the container grid and setting up the actual VCL rules on Fastly and doing the Fastly API integration, we're able to deliver something where you can install a module or a plugin on the CMS and with no configuration get the sort of cache management and granular cache invalidation that sites like NFL.com use. This is hard. This is actually such an upper tier of granular cache management that the only other providers I'm aware of that are high-ends, that are good CDNs that offer this are if you get full-on Cloudflare Enterprise or you get full-on Akamai, you get this sort of capability. But it's in that tier of cache management.
It should also be noted that the Battle of Fast versus Fresh is the title of the forthcoming Fast and the Furious 9 movie.
I would have taken that more for Game of Thrones, but yes. All right, next question. What can publishers do to further optimize site performance beyond the out-of-the-box offering of Pantheon and Fastly? Does Pantheon or Fastly perform any type of site review or recommendations for improvement?
Well, the short answer is no. I think the reality to the last question, we don't have, Pantheon doesn't provide professional services. That's one of our core differentiators with some others in our market, where we are a technology provider, we are a platform provider.
There are a lot of agencies.
And then, our launch, on the technology, we're going to have much more forthcoming both in terms of content, sample use cases, studies, historically, I think our platform has really been focused on solving kind of the core back-end performance problems. That's why we built all this new technology. That's why we integrated New Relic. That's why we always are pushing the envelope with the infrastructure we use. Because if you don't have a fast backend and that if you don't have a fast origin and your core CMS is just slow, it's very hard to you can basically try to paper over that very quickly, so it's very hard to do. And your content editors are never going to be happy. But now, because I'm not saying that that's a solved problem. We have a really, really rich solution for backend performance. And we've always had Varnish, which has been great and like a good kind of make total sense to do. It's an industry standard, best practice. Everybody should run Varnish if they aren't. But going beyond that to the global CDN, I think really brings us into this space of trying to help people optimize front-end performance. Because if your front-end performance is bad, your users are still going to suffer, and at the end of the day, that's what's going to drive your business down. So as of right now, we don't have like a little health checker that'll give you a grade on your front-end performance. There are a bunch of those out there already you can run. And we have a lot of experts at digital agencies and dev shops who are really, really well versed in Pantheon that know our platform very well and do specialize in precisely this type of work. And I really am looking forward to partnering with more of them as we kind of improve the state of this stuff globally.
But if you're looking kind of for a guide of like an overview of the process, I think it was recorded my San Francisco Drupal Users Group presentation Tuesday this week, which specifically covered the gamut of how to know when you have a front-end performance problem and some of the analysis tools that you might want to throw at it, just to get an overview. Because one thing that I like to caution people over is even though 200 milliseconds time to first byte is better than 300 millisecond time to first byte, or pick your numbers wherever you want. It seems better. There are definitely plateaus where improving a particular area of performance is not going to actually gain you anything. And it can be hard from just staring at numbers and watching them go up and down to know when you cross those thresholds. One of the things I cover most comprehensively in that deck is how to know when you're actually worse than the thresholds that actually affect things like user behavior, search engine ranking. But just as a rule of thumb, like 2.4 seconds first paint. If you're better than that, then you're at least on the good side of users getting super frustrated. And if your time to first byte is lower than 400 milliseconds, then you're in Google's good graces in terms of search engine ranking. Not that there aren't some reasons to be better than those, but that's just sort of ballpark to think about before you start thinking that you have a problem that requires drastic solutions. And probably before even doing that, I would switch any site on Pantheon to global CDN because we see it have huge cuts to loading times for both of those metrics before doing anything else to optimize the system.
All right, I'm going to squeeze 2 more quick questions in here for those still with us. Next one is, our site uses a reverse proxy for non-human traffic filtering, which uses a single Pantheon load balancer for an endpoint. Could the bot filtering proxy be integrated with the CDN?
So the short answer to that, again, is no. The kind of that NASA analogy is a good one because Pantheon controls the configuration of the whole stack. So we cannot accommodate a customer-specific configuration like whatever logic you have built in that reverse proxy. That's something we're thinking about being able to support in certain cases in the future. There's good reasons for being able to have that kind of flexibility as we go forward. But for the release we built now, I think the only one platform overall. You can certainly backend the existing reverse proxy to the Pantheon CDN, or there's a pretty straightforward way that you could become a customer of Fastly yourself, and we could layer these things together. That's something we have. Some of our current customers actually already do, and it's something that we're developing a good working relationship with Fastly's customer success team, helping people succeed with, where that extra level of control for your site in particular is warranted.
So we have a bot detection solution built into Fastly, and I think one of the things that we're really excited about going forward with Pantheon is, I know that sounds like a very marketing term, we're really excited going forward. we wanted to get like the basic product out, do this integration, do this really tight zero conflict integration, get all the TLS working, and then get the feedback from our customers, your Pantheon's customers, and really see where else we can take with this. I feel like we barely got started. There's a whole bunch of stuff we can do with everything from bot detection and image optimization to logging that we could explore like all kinds of features that we can do to make this even better. And really what we're trying to see is like, what's the initial reaction and then where do we go from there? How do we listen to you?
Yeah, the other thing that I'll add is when people look at things like bot detection, often they're trying to remove burdens on the origin in terms of load on Drupal. They're often trying to prevent spam posting. They're often trying to prevent various bots that are trying to maybe compromise the security of the site. And for at least those purposes, it's possible to throw that very early in the PHP on Pantheon because it's not actually most of the problem when a bot is able to hit the cache. Because all that happens is it just hits the cache and it gets the content. It typically becomes much more of a problem when the bot is doing behavior that is actually causing it to break through the cache and hit the origin. And while failing very early in PHP doesn't completely remove all the load, it removes the majority of it, and it often removes the load in the most important phase, which is before connecting to shared resources like the databases and caches. And it's fairly easy for us to scale out the PHP backend, especially at the level of before it's actually putting load on databases.
Yeah, there's a lot more to come on that front. I think I would echo the marketing terminology. We're very excited to work with Fastly. No, this is great for us because basically what it means for customers of Pantheon is that you now have multiple streams of innovation powering your website. We have a whole engineering team here that's dedicated to maximizing the benefits of our container technology, maximizing the benefits of our workflow technology, helping people collaborate better, solving the problems of managing hundreds of sites at scale, all those operational issues that we're uniquely positioned to do. And we're also going to have a stream of new features that will come because Fastly has a team of engineers that are working on building the world's best edge computing platform that we're leveraging to deliver this global CDN. So we'll just start to be able to do more quickly over time.
I got to say, I'm really excited about and the work that Fastly is doing on that, and that's something that will just be part of Pantheon once Fastly is shipping it.
Oh, so much marketing.
We're basically like Voltron.
Coming from. And what real world effect will this have on SEO?
A bunch.
So I am not an SEO expert, so it's like I'm not a lawyer. And I would say that the actual impact will depend very much on where you're ranking now and what the people ranking around you have or haven't done. I think if you're really interested in this from an SEO standpoint, I would look at your nearest competitors and see, are they running HTTPS all the time? What is their time to first byte? And if you're looking at them up, and it turns out that they've already done all the work and they're running, the next highest competitor has a really fast time to first byte and has HTTPS everywhere, this isn't going to move you up against that competitor. It's a relative ranking signal. So it wouldn't reduce your penalty versus them. So it won't reduce your penalty. It's a future-proofing thing. It'll help you retain your current rank as you might have people coming up from behind that are looking to optimize. So this is not like a hack to get to #1 with SEO. But I would also say that in the future, if not today, for any terms that are remotely contested, there's no way you're going to get #1 without these capabilities.
And a quick bonus question: what is the cost for all of this?
Thanks for setting it up, marketing.
I swear this was actually asked.
So Pantheon is delivering the global CDN for all sites and all plans for no additional cost. We talked about this a lot internally because there is a lot of value here, and there's there are different opinions in the early stages as to whether or not this should be a premium feature, whether or not we should, et cetera, et cetera. But for us, it's the right thing to do. It's what all sites need to thrive today, and I would say it is what all sites will need to survive in the future. We wanted to get from where we were, especially with regards to HTTPS, from being like a little bit frankly old school in our implementation to being, an industry leader. And we didn't feel like we could do that if it was a premium feature. I would say there's like some stuff we're looking at in the future that we would layer on top of this that might not be available to everyone out of the box, particularly if it involves like custom configuration and so forth. Obviously, that's something that we have to manage pretty carefully. From a business standpoint, the strategy here for us is it's definitely a sustainable process because we're going to be able to decommission a lot of infrastructure that we had to maintain ourselves before as we offload things to Fastly. And we believe that this is one of the best reasons, best arguments you can make to an agency or a large corporation or a university to say, this is the new standard. We need to get all the sites up to this new standard. And likewise, for one of our partners, like a digital agency, to say to their customers, yeah, we got to go to Pantheon. Like we're going to get all these things. It's the value proposition is too strong for us to like stay with whatever legacy hosting provider or managed hosting solution we currently use, because it becomes very clear that this is the platform for the future of the web.
And I'll add, if you were on Pantheon's legacy HTTPS, where you were deploying HTTPS by uploading a certificate to the dashboard, it is better than free to switch, because we will actually start charging you less money once we wind down your load balancer.
Yeah, we can decommission that old infrastructure, and you no longer have to spend the human time worrying about maintaining that cert. Those are like the worst support threads ever. When people are like, oh my god, my site's broken, it's what's going on, get the other. It's like, it looks like your cert expired.
Or that the right intermediate wasn't uploaded, and like some browsers have the intermediate, other ones don't.
Right, so it's like it works in Firefox and not in IE. So yeah, basically offload all that keep it effort.
On that note, thank you all so much for watching, and Simon, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, if you all have any questions or feedback, please visit our website where you will find a contact us page, and we'll put you in touch with the best member of our team. Have a great weekend, everyone.